We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people,
Thanks for coming out on this cold and wintry January evening. My name is Michael Spath, and I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace. We are a voice of conscience for peace, justice, human rights, and intercultural encounter. And we are in now our 21st year of providing programs about Palestine and the broader Middle East, as well as other intercultural programs here in Fort Wayne and Allen County. Our guest, Wendell Griffen, judge and pastor, co-wrote a book that came out just 2023. And I wanted to just highlight it. Now, he co-wrote it with our friend, Alan Bosak, Parables, Politics, and Prophetic Faith, Hope and Perseverance in Times of Peril. So with that, I'm going to introduce our guest for tonight, Wendell. He's a pastor, a retired judge in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he is a co-chair, one of two co-chairs of the nationwide Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, an organization of progressive Black clergy and church leaders committed to social justice. And Wendell, with that, take it away.
thank you, Michael. Good evening, and thank you for coming out on this wonderfully warm night. I have a deeper appreciation for the heartiness of your spirit that you are out in this evening when people would have found the way to excuse themselves from getting out of their warm houses into the cold night to come hear somebody they have never heard of and talk about something they may not have wanted to talk about, and then go back into the cold and have to cogitate upon it for the rest of the night. It is good to be here. I want to thank and echo Michael's thanks to this congregation, the Plymouth congregation, for hosting this gathering. I want to thank Indiana Center for Middle East Peace for the witness, the work you do, and the way you have done it these 21 plus years. That's almost a generation. That's a generation worth of work, a generation worth of witness in a time when the world has been and this nation has been changing. And it is to your credit that you are not only doing it, but you are doing it without apology. You are doing it deliberately. You are doing it openly. You are doing it in the spirit of prophetic resistance. And so I commend you and I thank you for that. I bring you greetings from the welcoming, inclusive, and prophetic followers of Jesus at New Millennium Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, where we believe that the religion of Jesus and the work of justice go hand in hand. As Alan Huzak says, if you say Jesus, you need to be able to think justice. And if you say justice, you need to think about Jesus. I say if you can't think of Jesus and justice in the same context, you don't know much about either. And in that context, the people of New Millennium have suffered with me for these years since we've been a congregation since 2009, and we have tried to follow Jesus together. They are your siblings in the work of Jesus and the work of justice, and we are in community with you. I want to talk this evening about the Black church and prophetic resistance to empire in America. But as I was thinking about that, I remembered this book by Alan Buzak titled Kairos, Crisis, and Global Apartheid, The Challenge to Prophetic Resistance. And at the end of one chapter, at the end of chapter 3, suffer with me as I read a paragraph. Buzak writes, in the global community today, we are facing serious challenges across the world in terms of our constitutional democracies, political integrity, spiritual authenticity, political moral authority, and our prophetic faithfulness. In our day, in our presence, struggles for justice, freedom, human dignity, and the integrity of creation are sweeping across the globe. And in the Church of Jesus Christ, we must face the question whether we have the courage to be on the right side of those struggles, ready to make the decisions that will take us to the places where Christ is to be found. Now, more than ever, the challenge still stands. It is time to transform words into deeds. The time for pious talk is over. The first time I read that, I will confess that I'm an Alan Buzak fan. I'm an Alan Buzak addict. I had the privilege of meeting him thanks to his mentor in the United States, Reverend J. Alfred Smith Sr., who was the pastor emeritus of the Allen Temple Baptist Church of Oakland, California. Now, if you don't know what the Allen Temple Church is, you need to understand that that's the church where the Black Panther Party grew out of. Yeah, the Black Panther Party grew out of a Christian church, a Black Christian church. I'm talking about the prophetic Black church and resistance in America. And the Black Panther Party was feeding children. They had a feeding program. They had a education program. They had a community defense program to defend the community against the police, because the police were targeting Black people. And the Panthers, which became known as the berated, Black berated leather jacket wearing people, were an outgrowth of a Black Baptist church. I'm talking about the prophetic Black church and resistance to empire. I make that emphasis because it's important for us to distinguish between the prophetic Black church and Black churches and churches with Black people in them. You said it again because you missed it. It is important to distinguish between the prophetic Black church and churches with Black people in them. We are days past the federal holiday honoring the life and the witness of Martin Luther King Jr., whose witness is discounted by the title of calling him a civil rights leader. Martin King Jr. was a Black Baptist pastor. And everything he did in the name of civil rights, he did it because he was a follower of Jesus. It was an outgrowth of his fellowship that took him from Atlanta to Boston University, where he did his graduate study, and then to Montgomery, Alabama, where he was at Dexter, the Montgomery bus boycott, then back over to Atlanta in the Southern Christian Leadership. The SCLC was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And ultimately to Memphis. A year to the day before King died, before he was murdered, King publicly defined the war in Vietnam as a civil rights issue in an address that is not quoted on Martin Luther King holidays. An address titled Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence. Speaking at a meeting of clergy and laity concerned about Vietnam at Riverside Church in New York. By the way, how many of you read that speech? Raise your hands. Oh, good, good. I see that it has been read. Now, I would encourage the rest of you to read it. Because Vincent Harding Jr., who helped him write that speech, years after King died, wrote that that was the speech that got King killed. In that speech, Martin Luther King Jr., after he had called on the United States to end its military presence in Southeast Asia and stop its involvement in the war in Vietnam, said these words, quote, I am concerned that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. And then King said, a true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. And then he said, there is nothing except a tragic death wish to prevent us from reordering our priorities. So the pursuit of peace will take precedence over the pursuit of war. Public reaction to King's message was swift and hostile. A number of editorial writers attacked him for connecting Vietnam and the war to the civil rights movement. The New York Times, the newspaper that has all the news that's fit to print, issued an editorial claiming that King had damaged the peace movement as well as the civil rights movement. Life magazine assailed the speech as, quote, demagogic slander that sounded like a script for Radio Hanoi. The Pittsburgh Courier, an African-American publication, charged King with, quote, tragically misleading Black people. And at the White House, President Lyndon Johnson was quoted as saying, quote, what is that GD? And he said, goddamn. N-word, he said, nigger. Preacher, doing to me. We gave him the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We gave him the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We gave him the war on poverty. What more does he want? Close quote. I mentioned that to remind us as a beginning that King died as one of the most unpopular people on the national stage. And I say without fear of contradiction that there are Black congregations now that have King's photograph on walls that we're not allowed King to preach where you're alive. So I mentioned that to distinguish the prophetic black church to churches with black people in them. And I mentioned that to remind us that the same King who wrote his letter to Birmingham City Jail in 1963 to white moderates and challenged the white church as being too stuck on its image and less concerned about its prophetic message. King was disregarded by the white church, but King was also put out of the National Baptist Convention. King, his father, and both grandfathers on both sides were officers in the National Baptist Convention, the oldest and largest body of black Baptists in the world. And because of his civil rights advocacy, his connection, his linkage between the religion of Jesus and the work of justice, King was stripped. I'm going somewhere with this. The president of the National Baptist Convention at the time was Joseph H. Jackson, pastor of Olivet Baptist Church in Chicago. After King's death, Chicago, like a number of other places, put up a Martin Luther King Drive, running past Olivet Church. Reverend Jackson was so displeased that he changed the front entrance to Olivet so it was not on Martin Luther King Drive, but was on another street. I say that to talk about the difference between the prophetic black church and churches with black people in them, and to underscore the importance that the call to be a follower of Jesus, as King understood it, and as Alan Guzik understood it, as I understand it, as James Cone understood it, as Fannie Lou Hamer understood it, as Frederick Douglass understood it, as Harriet Tubman understood it, is a call to resistance. A call to resistance in all its forms. And the challenge we have as followers of Jesus, and the challenge we have as followers of Jesus, particularly in this era, is to remember that we are called to be engaged in the business of resisting empire in all its various disguises. I mentioned this because I contend that Martin Luther King Jr. has been reassassinated and is reassassinated by the way we remember him. We reassassinate Dr. King when we basically treat his birthday as a time for our pietistic rituals. We have our rituals. The King holiday, day of service. Also, we can wallow in our injustice 364 days a week, a year, and wallow in the vomit of our injustice. And then one weekend out of the year, we talk about a day of service as if that's going to absolve the society of all the injustice that happened. We reassassinate King, who called on us not to have a day of service, but for us to undergo a radical revolution of values. Because if your values are changed, it's not changed one weekend out of a year. Your entire perspective on life is changed 24/7. I think that's something we need to remind you about. And that's something that we at the Proctor Conference can take intentionally serious, deliberate. The challenge of confronting empire in all its forms. The entire biblical text was written under versions of empire. at least 5 imperial systems: the Assyrian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Greek Empire, and lastly, the Roman Empire. Jesus spent his entire lifetime living under some version of the Roman Empire. He was the immigrant in chief. I mentioned that intentionally because we have a problem now with folks who call themselves followers of Jesus. We have problems with immigration. And they have a problem with undocumented immigration. Well, I mean, the second book of the Bible, the second chapter, Exodus, talks about the, the, the scandal of undocumented immigrants. You recall the babies, the Hebrew babies that were born? I am in the church, right? And I mean, every one of my bootleg Bibles has, all my bootleg copies has the second chapter of Exodus. All right. There is this empire that views the birth of another ethnic group's children as a national security threat. And the head of that empire outsources the massacre of those new children to women of that group whose job it was to murder the newborn children. That meant that the newborn children were enemies of the state. They were undocumented immigrants. So how is it that we have such a problem with undocumented immigrants, where the second book of our Bible, early on, before we talk about Moses, we talk about Shiphrah and Puah, who were the head of the midwives guild. They were head of the midwives guild. I know I read the text differently, but I've been black so long I have a license to do that. And before there was an Abraham, before there was a Moses, there was Shiphrah and Puah. Before there was a Mount Sinai experience, there was Shiphrah and Puah. Before there was a burning bush, Shiphrah and Puah did not need a burning bush to have them to understand there was something wrong about murdering babies. They didn't need to have a voice calling them out of a burning bush. The women did this. This radical revolution of values runs all the way through our text. And what King talked about, a radical revolution of values, is not new. It is integral to our text, and it is essential if we understand what it means to be people who do justice. So the question is, why don't we do this kind of stuff? I'm so glad you finished. In a word, we are more interested in being pietistic than we are in being prophetic. We would rather pray than act. We'd rather have Bible readings than Bible relevancy. God, deliver me from a faith that requires me to stand against what's wrong, because it will mean that I have to do something that suffers my reputation or my wealth or my status or my privilege. God, help me to hold out so I don't have to do anything. And the prophetic black church operates in opposition to that example. Frederick Douglass once said that he prayed for freedom for years, but he only got his freedom when he began to pray with his feet. In other words, he ran his way free. That happens to us. And we have to understand that this is the way we do justice. Justice doesn't come out of a crowd, justice comes out of a protest against oppression. Justice doesn't come out of a Sunday school class, it comes out of a Sunday school movement that moves people off their ASS in class into the streets where the injustices happen. By the way, I have a cussing condition. I'll give you that warning now. I believe that cussing is important. I took grammar lessons as you did. I learned about synonyms, antonyms, homonyms. The word bless means to benefit. The anonym of bless is not pray. It's cuss. It's cuss. And the black pastor Johnny Ray Youngblood once said, the problem with many of our churches is that we are blessing stuff we should be cussing. And we don't want to cuss the stuff that we should be cussing. So the folks who are cussing about the stuff that ought to be cussing have the reputation of talking nasty when they're simply talking the truth. And the folks who are not talking that way are the ones who we should be talking nasty about because we have been given a license to cuss what's wrong. I know. I'm doing something. But let me give you another example. Okay. Jesus often said, you have heard it said, but I say, right? You have heard it said, but I say. I would like to suggest we've heard it read, but we need to read differently. I use the example, we read Jesus saying to Peter, get thee behind me. But Jesus didn't speak in Shakespearean language. I give the Griffen paraphrase. The homeboy edition of that text is Jesus told Peter to kiss his ass. Peter, you get out of my face. Get out of my face with this nonsense. And he didn't just tell Peter, he told Satan that after the wilderness. Get out of my face. We have to have that kind of notion. And we have to have that kind of prophetic sense in the face of empire. The things that are killing people, whether it's global poisoning of our air and our water and the ground, whether it's the denial of health care to people because they are not rich enough. For crying out loud, Jesus healed folks who had pre-existing conditions without a copay. Hello? Hello? So how is it that folks who call themselves followers of Jesus have a problem with universal health care? How is it that people who call themselves followers of Jesus have a problem with embracing the marginalized when Jesus went into a graveyard, held a conversation with somebody who was mentally deranged, healed that person, and then was run out of town by the Chamber of Commerce because the man was healed. Okay? Now don't laugh. Everywhere Martin King went, where he challenged the empire of racism, King was told to leave town. He was called a troublemaker, an outside agitator. But we don't write the connection between the troublemaking Jesus and the troublemaking King and the troublemaking Buzak and troublemaking Black Panther Party. Hello? Hello? It is possible to be so damn pious you are no heavenly good. In case I was missed, it is not to be so damn pious. You are no heavenly good, but you're also no earthly good, because Jesus said, "Thy will be done, thy kingdom come," not in heaven. God not worried about getting the kingdom done in heaven. God is not worried about us getting heaven fixed. God does not need our help fixing heaven. God needs our cooperation to get this mess fixed. And so Jesus said, "Thy will be done, thy kingdom come on earth." On earth. And the kingdom doesn't get done on earth by angels. Hello? God's not going to send a legion of angels down from some reverse rapture, okay, and fix global apartheid. God's not going to fix the poisoning of the air and the water by sending the angels down. If we're waiting for Jesus to come back before this mess gets fixed, it's not going to happen. Racism isn't created in heaven. Newsflash, this mess, that I use the term politely because y'all, now, if I was doing in church, I'd say this shit. And this mess is systematized. It's systematized. Jamaicans talk about shitstones. Jamaicans talk about shitstones. The combination of shit and systems. That there are shitstones in the world. Unhoused people in the nation that calls itself the most wealthy nation in the world is a result of shitstones. People who die because they can't afford to get health care in a nation that has the most advanced health system in the world are not dead because they are too poor. They're dead because we have too much of a system that invests in the enriching of health uncare community. And we've made healthcare a commodity. And remember what King said? There's the giant triplets: racism, capitalism, and militarism. The healthcare system is a function of capitalism, y'all. What Jesus was doing by healing all this over free is saying, listen, it's possible to get this done on earth. It can happen. All of the healing miracles you read about in the scripture happen on earth. But they happen because faithful people, prophetic people, got off their Sunday school books and put that healing power of God to work. The prophetic black church understands this. The pietistic church of any ethnic group doesn't. And that's why the world doesn't change. The world isn't the way it is because of secular humanists. This world is the way it is because the folks who call ourselves followers of Jesus are more concerned about being pious than we are concerned about being relevant. And that is the reality. That's the reality. Now, I'm going to say a couple more things because I haven't got my point across. Saying and reading that I have a dream speech will not change the world. Listening to recordings of King's speeches will not change the world. Having days of service will not change the world. And inviting politicians will not change the world. And making them the dignitaries of these gatherings will not change the world. Can you imagine Jesus inviting Pontius Pilate and putting Pontius Pilate on Front Street as Jesus is delivering the Sermon on the Mount? But that's what we do. That's what we do. And Pontius Pilate in our time are the people of empire, the people who keep the systems, or as Jamaican says, the systems in place. And until we realize that it is our job as followers of Jesus to rethink this issue, or as Alan Gusak writes in another book titled Selfless Revolutionaries. I mention all these titles. I'm doing it on purpose, okay? Because you might be getting your videotaping. I hope you'll get these titles out, because selfless revolutionaries are people who are not concerned about what they will get personally from the revolution, but what the revolution will do that challenges the systems. Selfless revolutionaries are not concerned about how they are going to be editorialized by the propaganda networks of the media outlets. Selfless revolutionaries are not concerned about how they are going to be shown up, or whether they're going to make a CNN appearance or an MSNBC appearance. Selfless revolutionaries are people who are actually talking about and doing the kind of stuff that turn the world upside down. You know, that text is in Acts. You know, Acts was what I call the fifth gospel. I call Acts the gospel according to the Holy Spirit. Now I have I tell people I'm licensed in two professions, in law and ministry, so I have the license to make up words and terms. But Acts is about what the Holy Spirit does and what the followers of Jesus do, because the Holy Spirit has led them, and because of the Holy Spirit, followers of Jesus created an integrated ethnically and a cooperative kind of ministry, but it was revolutionary because it had women involved in it. At the same time, it was imperfect, because women were the folks who were most with Jesus, and the folks who were with Jesus at the cross, and the folks who were with Jesus because Jesus died, the folks who were with Jesus at the tomb, and folks who were with Jesus when he rose, and folks who carried the message of the risen Jesus forward. And when they had a vote to replace Judas, women were the only folks who didn't get a vote. The imperfect church, however, became the radical church. We don't have to be perfect to be radical. I'm trying to make a point. It was not perfect. It was not prophetic perfection. It was prophetic faithfulness, even in its imperfection. And the challenge we have is our refusal to be prophetically faithful. Faithfulness is not about quoting Bible verses. Now, I'm Baptist. All right? You can do two things with Baptists. You get baptized and you learn Bible verses. You get baptized and you learn Bible verses. You have Bible drills. Children have Bible drills. Naming the books of the Bible in order. Okay. And the children. Some folks here know you have Baptist Training Union, BYPU. Okay. Now you got to be a certain kind of age. I am old, all right. I'm so old that Dirk calls me sir. But but none of that changed the world. Knowing that Matthew is the first book in the New Testament, and Mark comes after Matthew, and Luke comes after Mark, and John comes after Luke. does not change the world. It is doing. It is faithfulness. Which brings me to my last point now. I'll put it. Because we have to talk about the fact that what we're really dealing with is our hypocrisy.
And Wendell, how does this American empire connect to our struggle for rights for our Palestinian friends?
That's where I'm going. For almost now 80 years, the people of Palestine, where Jesus was born, spent most of his life, where he was executed, where he spoke things we read in our various traditions. The people of Palestine have been the victims of an apartheid regime that this nation, under God, with liberty and justice for our people, have subsidized, militarized, blessed, and achieved. How many of you heard of the Anglo-American Committee? The Anglo-American Committee was a committee that was led by a man named Eric Harrison, who was dean of the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Appointed to head that committee by Harry S. Truman. Anybody heard of the guy's name? Harry S. Truman was a Baptist. Yeah, he was a volunteer Baptist. He sent Eric Harrison to go investigate the conditions of the Jewish people in the formerly home concentration camps. The short thing is that after that trip, Eric Harrison wrote Harry Truman a letter and published in the New York Times in September of 1946, in which he said the condition of the Jews in the liberated areas were treated by U.S. forces like the Germans had treated them. And the Jews wanted to get out of Europe. The question is, where do they go? Guess where they couldn't go? The United States. Hello? The United States. Shiploads of Jewish refugees were turned away during the years before the World War II and were turned back to Europe, and people died by the boatloads in the Holocaust, not because there was no place for them to go, but because the people who bragged about having liberated them from Hitler refused to save them. And then, having done so, were so guilt-ridden that they decided to bless putting them in Palestine. Hello? Palestine wasn't the only option. There was consideration of putting them in Uganda. Or in Argentina. But the deal was, the British were in Palestine, and the British and the Jewish agency had a relationship, and the British were catching so much hell from the Arabs in Palestine and the Jewish people in the British agency that they were said, we're going to get rid of Palestine, we're going to wash hands of it, once it's Palestine. Eric Harrison said, where we put these people, and they suggested putting them in Palestine. The problem was they wanted to put 100,000 Jewish immigrants into Palestine, and Great Britain wouldn't agree to it. The United States wouldn't agree to it. And that was when Great Britain says, withdrew the trusteeship of Palestine. And one day after Great Britain said our trusteeship is done, the Jewish Agency announced the creation of a place called Israel. Now that is the history of the modern state of Israel. The Anglo-American Committee, months before that, had done a 10-point paper after months of study, during which they said that there should not be an Israeli state or an Arab state, but one state. Not a two-state solution, because a two-state solution is Jim Crow on a global scale. Hello? Let's keep it real, y'all. Not a two-state solution, but one state. The Jewish Agency wouldn't agree to it. I 10-time double dog dare you to prove me wrong. Go look up the Anglo-American Committee. You can Google it. You can read the report. The United States wouldn't approve it. Great Britain wouldn't approve it. Part of the report required that one state solution be enforced by the United States and Great Britain, and neither the United States or Britain would agree to do it. That's why 11 minutes after the Jewish Agency announced that there was a new state called Israel, the United States recognized Israel. Now, I've been talking only 11 minutes. From that time, May 1948 till now, we have in this nation has invested in maintaining essentially a Jim Crow notion in Palestine. And the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference and other prophetic folks have been talking about this. That's part of why Jeremiah Wright caught so much hell. Because Proctor Conference in 2003, Barack Obama didn't run for office until 2000. Proctor in 2003 was talking about Palestinian liberation. Hello? Palestinian liberation is real, y'all. But the problem is the followers of Jesus don't love Jesus enough to love Palestinians. We are not willing to do the work of Jesus to stand with Palestinians in their situation. Because what did Alan Buzak write? Buzak wrote that what you got to do is stand where Jesus stood. Jesus stood with that guy in the cemetery. Jesus stood with the people who were ill. Jesus stood with the people who were oppressed. We would rather stand with the folks who look like, I'm going to say it, white folks, and have white privilege. And that's how the Palestinians catch so much hell now. Those of us who have been to Palestine, and I went in 2015, I landed in Tel Aviv, and I had a PTSD experience. I had a post-traumatic stress disorder. Why? Because I landed in Tel Aviv and I ran firsthand into my first experience in decades of being in Jim Crow. See, I grew up in Jim Crow. Jim Crow is not something I read about. I knew Jim Crow and Jane Crow and the children. Jimmy, Jerry, Susie, and Kate. The Crows. Okay? the Crows. And the fact of the matter is, Jim Crow was blessed by white Christians in this country. And Jim Crow in Palestine is blessed by white Christians in this country. And that's why Palestinians catch so much hell. The same kind of white supremacy and ethnocentrism and tolerance for white supremacy that happened in this country is tolerated in the face of Palestinians. And the Palestinians now for the last 70 some odd years have been dealing with it. And we are so out of touch that we believe that it started on October the 7th. Come on. The International Court of Justice last year came out and said, there has been apartheid in the West Bank since 1967. Folks complain about Hamas. Does anybody ever heard of the USS Liberty? The USS Liberty? The USS Liberty was a United States naval vessel patrolling in international waters before June 6, 1967. It was fired on by Israeli planes. It had the United States flag. It did a distress call. U.S. aircraft were dispatched twice and called back twice. U.S. sailors died. The survivors were threatened with court-martial if they talked about it. And why was the U.S. Liberty attacked? Because the U.S. Liberty would have been able to document that what was called the Six-Day War was not begun by Arab attack, but by a preemptive Israeli attack to decimate the Egyptian Air Force. Hello. And for the last 2 quarters of a century, Palestinians have heard folks talk about the Six-Day War. 6 days, because the Lord made the world in 6 days. 6 days. And they've heard folks who call Christian talk about the promised land. Now let me ask you something. What kind of God tells you that you can have my land? And at the same time says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, thy neighbor's jackass, thy neighbor's oxen, but you can covet his whole land. This is what the Palestinian issue is about. It is a theological question, but it is a prophetic challenge. And the prophetic black church talks about this in that frame. This is not what you're going to have from Billy Graham. Hello? You can sing 5,000 verses just as I am, but I want to play all you want to. You can't amazing grace your ass out of this. Okay? This is the reality. And until we who are followers of Jesus have enough backbone to stand with Jesus in the situation, this kind of shitstorm will continue, but it will be on a global basis. Because the Israelis are not only stealing the land and the water, they are poisoning. But the Palestinians don't surrender. Gaza is now a waste. It was at one time the world's largest prison. Now it is the world's largest deconstruction zone. Who's going to reconstruct Gaza? And who's going to enforce it? With the same folks who blessed? That's why the prophetic resistance is important. I'm going to stop now with this word. Alan Buzak says this, that when you and I get into the next realm, call it the pearly gates, whatever you call it. The question will be, where are your wounds? And if we are not wounded, the next question will be, was there nothing about which you should be wounded for? I pray that whatever we do, we decide to remember that the Christ who was wounded by empire cannot be followed by people who refuse to be wounded.
Well, there's probably nothing really to talk about. Wendell, come on back up here. Who would like?
Oh man!
Who would like to ask the first question?
Why does he trust so much?
Could you say it again, what we were talking about before?
The question was, can I say again what I ended with? Alan Buzak talks about, and he uses this reference about a man in South Africa, a teacher in South Africa who was always known as not getting in trouble. And didn't want to get in trouble, but one time he found out speaking up and getting in trouble, and he was asked why he got in trouble, and he said, "I think when I die, I expect that I expect to go before the Lord and will ask where are your wounds." And the question will be, "I have none." The answer will be, "I have none." The question will be, "Was there nothing to be wounded for?" Where are your wounds? No, where are your wounds? And if I because I'm in church, I will use the hymn term. Must Jesus bear the cross alone? Yes.
I'd just like to ask you to follow up with a word about Christian nationalism. And how can we dismiss it? I mean, we had a battle, and you might have the answer.
The question is, what can we do about Christian nationalism and how can we dismiss it? Now, I've been black a long time, and so y'all got to listen to me tell you this.
All right.
Okay? Y'all wake up. Where the hell y'all been all the night? What do you think Billy Graham was talking about? Billy Graham took his Christian nationalist self into every White House and every administration. He prayed and blessed over every war. And before Billy Graham, I mean, Christian nationalism is not new. We really don't use the word Christian nationalism because that goes all the way back before Billy Graham. We didn't use the F word, fascism. It is not Christian nationalism. It is fascism. Because as long as the Christian nationalists were just having prayer meetings and not trying to run stuff, except operate under the guise of the Ku Klux Klan, the Chamber of Commerce, and hello, because everybody who ran for office in this country talked about they were a member of some church. And they used their church relationship to get votes. Hello? Don't act like I'm the only one who knows this. I carry with me on my person a Bible and a copy of the U.S. Constitution. Every one of my copies of the Constitution has a provision that says that there is no religious test for holding office.
Yes, sir.
It is in plain language, y'all. So why is it that everybody says that you got to swear to faithfully uphold, so help me, Christian nationalism. The problem with Christian nationalism is fascism. And the nation that said that fascism was hellish when the Germans did it in the 1930s were fine with it between the time of Hitler until now. Watching while those of us who were living on the underside of life were knowing that this was fascism all along. The KKK and the John Birch Society and all the so-called groups, the Family Life American God, this is what's going on. I love everybody, but let me tell you something. If black folks had done the version of Christian nationalism, y'all would have gone crazy. Y'all would have had riots, but white folks embraced this and did not have a problem with it. How do I know? Because white churches had the American flag in the sanctuary. Didn't it? Didn't it? There is no king but Caesar, but you got the American flag. Jesus Christ is my life, but you got the American flag in the sanctuary. Hello? So you can't act like, oh, Christian nationalism. And you got the big A American flag, and the flag didn't just keep, didn't sneak in the sanctuary. Somebody ordered the flag, set the flag up there, and somebody said, praise the Lord, we got us a flag.
Who's next?
My wife will answer the question shortly. I can do that.
Please, Ron.
I just want you to know, I don't know if it's Empire or what, but I took a note on my phone to put shitsms down, and they kept auto correcting. It wouldn't let me put the word in. I don't know if it's I or it's Trump or what.
It is systems is a Rastafarian term. Do Rastafarian and then system, and you'll pick it up.
Well, I got it down, but I had to work at it.
Who's next?
Does any of this make sense, y'all?
I don't just blame those on the religious right. I blame the rest of us, because while they were plotting and scheming and planning, and Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson were building universities, and they had their theology schools, but they were building law schools. They were building law schools, and we thought these people were just flaky on the right. And the rest of us were going on our merry way, and those so-called progressives like us, we were quiet. We were the quiet of the land. And now we're all aghast that these people are doing what they said that they would always do. This hasn't been done in secret. They're doing what they said they would always do. And now we're aghast at what's occurring. We're to blame. And we need to repent as much as they do. And we need to gird our loins now and commit ourselves to resist.
Two things, Michael. Two words. Selfless revolutionaries, book I mentioned above, contains two terms you need to come to grip with. Manufactured consent is the role of the U.S. media. Manufactured consent and manufactured contentment is the role of U.S. religion. Manufactured consent, Noam Chomsky, and manufactured contentment. The problem is we do not have enough prophetic discernment to recognize stuff when we see it. You understand? If you don't recognize that you're dealing with a rattlesnake, When it's rattling, hello, Project 25 has been on the websites. And folks were not, how many of you had a Project 25 session in your church? Okay. Okay. When October 7th happened, the Proctor Conference had a series of sessions weekly on what it means to be Black and Christian in a time of war. How many of us have had situations on what it means to be Christians in a time of war and deconstruct the Israeli-Palestinian issue? Why not? What has kept you from doing it? Who said it was against the law? We do know better because we want to know better. And because of that, we, and he said it, have ourselves to run.
Who else? Taco, please.
I just want to know if we had enough time to hear that psalm you wrote.
Maybe a little bit later.
All right.
You need to close.
All right.
Or maybe you can reference it. Maybe you can use it.
All right, I want to read.
All right. You can do that. Say a word quickly about, we know that Zionism did not originate with David Ben Gurion or the Jewish lobby. Zionists began in Great Britain with Christian Zionism.
Yes.
Say a word about that.
Yes. Theodore Herzl was 1897. 2 generations before that, you have Zionism in Great Britain and worked its way into the United States. The Scofield Bible. Hello? The Scofield Bible. Folks were busy buying the Scofield Bible and having Scofield study Bibles and premillennial and dispensationalism. Hello, by the way, theological schools thought that was a joke, but hey, that's the deal. Mike Huckabee is going to become the ambassador to Israel, and Elsie Stefanik is going to be the ambassador to the United Nations because they believe, Elsie Stefanik told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee yesterday that she believes that the Bible requires that the land of Palestine belongs to the Jews.
Jews have a biblical right to the land.
Yeah. Now, I did a Substack post yesterday. You can look it up. Newsflash. The Bible is not a land deed. I 10 times double dog dare you to use your Bible as a basis of conveying any piece of ground in the world. If you walk into any courthouse or any land title place, that I got a Bible. And this is my claim. They will do one of 2 things. They will politely escort you out, or they will call the nearest mental health agency and take your demented self home. But we now have people who on public are saying there's a biblical basis. And so people are going to be run off their land based on something that everybody knows is not a deed. Well, I mean, let me just say, you're not right. Not everybody. Not everybody. But right thinking, folks. I mean, how many of you use the Bible as your property transaction document in the culture? Right? Now, that'll make you less Christian or less biblical. But you got better sense to walk in there and say, listen, I own this land because my parents' name is in the Bible. Now, I got family Bibles with my ancestors' name, listen, lineage. But I can now use that to prove that my ancestors owned anything other than that. Oh,
Why don't we,
let me read the scripture.
why don't you please read that, without closing the Q&A?
New Millennium Church, since December of 2023, ends every worship service with a prayer. A prayer for justice concerning Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. To the one who gives all life, God of creation, love, justice, hope, peace, truth, and vindication. Hear this prayer for your children in Gaza, the occupied West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Hear our prayers for the infants of Palestine. Hear our prayers for their parents. Hear our prayer for the playmates, children in Gaza who will never know. Hear our prayers on their behalf for justice. See the silent and sobbing tears we weep for the futures they will never experience. Smiles, laughter, giggles, all lost. Bombed, incinerated, targeted, massacred. The slaughtered children, parents, and elders cannot plead for help. The nations of the world will not protect them. Religious leaders across the world do not cry out for them. Politicians in Israel, the United States, and their allies calculate how to take advantage of them, discount them, and subsidize, arm, and cover for Israel. Israeli defense forces collectively punish them, occupy them, displace them, massacre them, and abuse them. O God of life, love, truth, and justice, judge the hands that are murdering your children. Judge the politics of hate, bigotry, deceit, hypocrisy, and fear, masquerading under disguises while dealing in death-dealing lies. Settler colonizing and land stealing and white supremacist lies. Security for Israel, lies. Self-defense, lies. Israel is the one true democracy in the Middle East, lies. Judge the perpetrators and the sycophants of apartheid, genocide, ethnic cleansing, white supremacy, Zionist-minded racism, Islamophobia, Christian Zionism, imperial fascism, and xenophobia. Judge those who deprive your Palestinian children food, clean water, safe shelter, sanitation, medical care, and protection from their enemies. Take notice of those who bomb hospitals, churches, synagogues, schools, refugee camps, and life support systems. Judge the snipers who murder women and children while they leave places of prayer and praise and refuge and reflection. O God of truth, justice, and vindication, avenge them in your name. Avenge the massacred people in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Avenge the displaced. Avenge the tortured. Avenge the detained. Avenge the persecuted, hunted, and murdered journalists. Deliver fierce judgment against the murderers, land thieves, slanderers, and enemies of your Palestinian children. Judge the people who perpetrate their genocide, displacement, and suffering. Judge the people who put more value on corporate profits than the child protection. Avenge your children, God. Vindicate their rights to live, grow, learn, love, and heal the world. Hear their deadening voices. Avenge your Palestinian children. Please, God. As God of justice for their sake, do not hold back your wrath against their oppressors. Bring judgment against those who treat your children in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem as worthless, disposable, expendable, forgettable, unprotected, defenseless. Avenge your Palestinian children, God. Comfort them by your acts of vengeance. We appeal to your exclusive right to avenge the deaths, the land theft, and other suffering of our Palestinian siblings. Our hearts are pregnant with outrage. Make us your co-workers for justice against those who oppress and slaughter your children in Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. Loosen our tongues to loudly declare your judgment on all involved in the oppression of Palestinians between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. Strengthen us to defend and support the Palestinian resistance to that oppression. Guide us to help their fight for freedom, independence, self-determination, and equality. Teach us how to speak your truth, hope, and work for justice. Rise up, O God, in power. Vindicate the people of Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Rise, O God, rise. That's our prayer.